And for reaction to all of this, let's bring in our State House insiders. Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist, Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist. Dave, a deal finally in the works here. What are we, some 23, 24 days into the fiscal year?
What we're seeing right now, JR, is a lot of positioning and wrangling between the House and the Senate. How are we going to handle earmarks? How are we going to handle those specialized dollars that are going into communities? They worked back and forth throughout the day yesterday. They've consulted with the governor what he is and is not going to turn around and veto. But there are certain arguments that are being made, and the question becomes one of which of the two chambers is getting the upper hand. And at the end of the day yesterday, where the Senate had started the day with the upper hand, the House definitely turned around and stuck it to the Senate. Let's just be honest.
And I would just say, look, I'm not surprised by the duration or the intensity of this process. We are now going to elect a new governor in South Carolina come November. I think that both the House and the Senate want to send the future governor a message that this is a state assembly power state. And so we ultimately get to decide what is what. But I also think being in an election year, where you see these transitions in both parties. But let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, the dominant Republican Party, you're starting to see what happens when life after the MAGA movement is starting to take place. Do we go back to traditional grand old party values, or do we stay in this posture of this Doge MAGA type environment where we cut government to the bones and just expect the people of South Carolina to survive?
That's one of the biggest arguments, JR, that's coming through all of this. We talk about infrastructure all the time. We talk about roads and bridges. But to Antoine's point, there are social infrastructures that go underneath all of that. What are we doing for education? What are we doing for issues along the lines of public safety? What are we doing when it comes to mental health? What are we coming to do when it comes to healthcare in South Carolina? And those are hardcore issues that really have to be dealt with, and they can't necessarily be dealt with by pulling out the budget knife and slicing stuff off, because they're cutting into the meat right now.
Funeral services for Lindsey Graham taking place next week. We have services in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, here in Columbia on Wednesday. Filing for his seat opened up on Tuesday of this week, ends next Tuesday. The former governor, Mark Sanford, throwing his hat into the ring today. Antoine, I know you guys, the Democrats, you've got your candidate with Annie Andrews. Do you think one Republican candidate has an advantage over the other right now?
Infrastructure and resources matter in a pop-up quick turnaround special election like this. I think that running is good exercise according to all the health experts I know, but just because you're running doesn't mean you're running to win or going to win. And so I think we'll see that bubble out. But I think for people who are paying attention, it's one thing for the governor to fill the unexpired term of Lindsey Graham with Lindsey's sister. That's not anything out of the ordinary, but it's another thing for now to have her record on full display, and for people to be able to critique her because she's inserted herself in the elected element of the political process. And so you'll hear a lot of people saying, well, we should give them grace. We shouldn't be saying this and shouldn't be saying that. She's now entering to a sport that is known to be a contact sport. So expect a lot of bruising, a lot of blood, and a very intense primary, because it's not often in any state, particularly South Carolina, where there's a vacant Senate seat and people have the ability to openly pursue the nomination.
I mean, in my lifetime, there have been 5 senators from the state of South Carolina: Fritz Hollings, Strom Thurmond, Jim DeMint, Tim Scott, and Lindsey Graham. And we don't switch our senators out very often at all. As a matter of fact, it's either by death or resignation that they leave. And when you look at the intensity, as Antoine said a moment ago, of what this race is going to be, and the timeline for it is extremely short. I mean, we're talking just a few weeks, because we still have the November election, and you can almost be guaranteed when you have Russell Fry, Darlene Graham, Ralph Norman, Mark Sanford in a race like this, and whoever else is going to, Mark Lynch, who's now going to be in the race, you're almost guaranteed there's going to be a runoff election as well, which will nearly take us to the end of August before we have that done. So it's going to be just before Labor Day that Republicans actually decide who's going to be their candidate. And from the numbers that are coming in, Annie Andrews is racking up millions of dollars.
And I would just say this: at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who the nominee is going to be on the other side. I like to adopt the old Bill Belichick strategy. No matter what team you're playing against, you run your plays when you know you have the better team, when you know you have the better playbook. And I think that has to be the Democratic mindset and thinking for Dr. Andrews. But I will also say on the Republican note, there's going to be some serious questions of whether Darlene Graham can run in the Republican primary based on the resolution that was passed about how many consecutive or primaries you have to have participated in order to be on the Republican ballot as a candidate and or nominee. And so I think we have not seen the last of what this process is going to play about. But I will say what I said last week on this program: if I died tomorrow, JR and Dave, you won't see my sister or my brother sitting in this chair doing this just because they are my sister or my brother. Qualifications to some degree should matter. And she's going to be in a primary where you have sitting lawmakers and others who have a proven track record with community and within the Republican ecosystem, who has not always been friendly to Lindsey Graham and his style of politics.
Well, that's where the president's also jumped into the middle of all of this. I mean, let's be honest here. Donald Trump jumped into the gubernatorial race and then jumped back in it again and diluted the value of his endorsement when it went from Pam Abbott to Pam and Alan Wilson. So, I mean, the president's trying to steer something. We just don't know which direction he's steering it.
All right. Dave Wilson, Antoine Seawright, guys, as always, thank you so very much for your time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back with much more in just a moment.